People who have adult children that don't talk to you. Why do you think that is? Mom here. My 23-year-old hasn't spoken to me in 4 years. It was completely my fault. I've struggled with addiction, alcohol, and for most of her childhood I was bad. I hope to be able to apologize to her someday. But I completely understand and respect her decision. I feel like the only group of NC parents that routinely take ownership of themselves being the reason are the recovering addicts. I think it's because addicts may or may not be complete assholes when sober. They might actually be lovely without the drug. But people who are assholes while sober, that's just how they really are. Parent. It's because I fucked up and neglected the relationship. I wasn't the father she deserved. It's that simple. I'm going to pretend my dad wrote this and accept that him ignoring me, my daughter, my husband, and a life we've made is really that simple. He neglected the relationship. He's not the father I deserve. You don't need to hear him say it to know it's true. If your dad wasn't there for you and wasn't the father you deserve, that's on him. It hurts you too. But it's not your fault and had nothing to do with you. From the other parent perspective, my adult children, 25 and 23, do not communicate with their father at all. Long story short, he remarried about a week after our divorce was final, and he and his new wife went on to have children of their own. Over time, his visits with the children became more infrequent and stressful due to his wife's distaste for me and my children. He has had no contact with the kids in over 3 years, and his previous attempt was 4 years before that. My youngest says he will never forgive his father for replacing us all with a new family and forgetting us. The oldest says it's just not worth chasing someone who has no interest. Personally, I'm sad and angry on their behalf. He divorced me, not them. Edit. I can't reply to everyone. But I want to say, the amount of people who say they've experienced this same issue astounds me and breaks my heart. I just do not understand a parent who can walk away from their child, Ren, even when it's been hard and I've had to be both mom and dad. I wouldn't trade my kids for anything. There's a woman at church, and every week she asks for prayers during prayer requests. At first I thought it was kinda cute, but it's over a year later, and she always asks for prayers that her children will speak with her again. She claims to have been the best mother, and one by one, all 3 of her adult children, and thus her grandchildren, stopped speaking with her. But she did everything right. She fed them. She clothed them. She put them through school, which to me sounds like the bare minimum that you're supposed to do as a parent, and not everything. But okay, I gave her the benefit of the doubt, but then, every week, another piece of the puzzle would come out. She tried calling, but her number's blocked. She tried to find them on social media, but she's blocked. How strange. She says she was such an excellent mother. Why would they block her? She tried reaching out again and received a handwritten letter on why she should never contact them again. But we never heard the contents of the letter. We were just supposed to pity her and have sympathy and assume that these entire separate groups of people were evil and were doing her emotional harm. I got to know her, and she is an abusive narcissist and nothing short of pure evil. All the red flags you'd expect are there. But every week it's pray to Jesus for me, everybody. My evil ungrateful children. Blah blah blah. I'd like to hope she is just clueless, but I understand she is sick and probably doesn't know how horrible she really is. I feel very, very bad for her kids, but very happy they were strong enough to break away from that hot mess. It almost brings me physical pain now when she asks for prayers that her kids will talk to her again, because I know all she wants to do is resume hurting them. My stepdaughter is an addict and mentally ill. Her son was placed in our custody by the state 3 years ago at 13 months old, and she has never made the effort to regain custody. Her rights were terminated last year, and we adopted him last month when the state gave us the choice. She has hated us ever since he was placed here and has convinced herself that we stole her child. She only contacted my husband if she wanted money, which he won't give her, so that makes her hate us more. This is my niece. Except she had 8 kids, thinking this one she'd be a good mom. She has none. 5 we are adopted out to non-family, and 3 my sister, her aunt, has. Same with my half-sister. I've had some of her adopted out kids contact me through Ancestry. I was very deep in resolving my own trauma when my kids were growing up. I was often distant and emotionally unavailable. I wasn't the parent they deserved. It is the greatest sorrow of my life. I did to my kids what my mom did to me. I can't be sorry enough. I want to thank you, sincerely, for this comment and the level of introspection. Seriously, I wish my parents were like this. They think nothing's wrong, and I see them maybe once a year. They think that's normal mayo. My daughter went through a traumatic event when she found out her mom was having an affair with a junkie. Daughter was furious at her mom for destroying the family. Mom flipped out, threatened suicide to our daughter's face, blaming her. At that moment, everything shifted and daughter became the nurturer to her mom, who regressed into childhood. A complete switching of roles when my daughter really needed a mom. Mom wasn't safe to be angry at, for fear she'd kill herself. So I became the target. We talk, but it's so terse and superficial that it's close to non-communication. I'd like to talk through what happened, even in a therapeutic setting, but daughter says that's off the table. Their dad gave an ultimatum: if they want to have a relationship with him, they had to go NC, edit, no contact, with me. My middle child agreed to those terms. My dad gave an ultimatum as well: talk to me, or I'm taking you out of the will. I wasn't going to be threatened like that, and we haven't spoken since. That was a lose-lose for me. Accept the money, and then that's the only reason I came back, making me an asshole. Don't come back and talk to family. I'm still the asshole. My mom tried that. I expected her to try harder for longer before playing that card. It backfired spectacularly, since she has nothing. My children are low contact. I feel it's fair. Their mother has BPD. She was violent and abusive. She has gotten help, but she still hurt them. I did not protect them. Them not being around me is justified. They should be angry. We fucked up. They didn't do anything wrong, and they need to heal as they see fit. Kids not being around their parents have valid reasons. Most people just can't accept it. Not too far off from my dad, but he'd join in the beatings. Part out of fear of drawing her ire. He almost never exhibited signs of having a backbone, unless he could physically overpower someone. And part because I think the only way he know how to deal with kids was yelling at them or beating them. Because that's just what you did in the 50s, when he was a kid. He did have moments where he defied my mother though. So as an adult he was the only parent I wanted anything to do with, until he showed signs of being a racist. Followed by me playing dumb, until he explained in plain English that he was in fact being a racist. After that I'd only interact with him if forced into the same room. He didn't get vaccinated and was killed by COVID last spring, long after vaccinations came out. Didn't go to his funeral. Can only make assumptions about which town he's buried in. Haven't shed a tear for him. So yeah, as the adult child, we'll remember the bad the less bad parent did. But if you tried at least a little bit in some impactful way, for me BTW, it was two things. 1. My dad giving up his own breakfast when I was somewhere between 8 and 10 because he'd been watching my mother starve me for days. And 2. He realized his decades of fuck up when she basically left him to die while he was having a stroke. You have to be an irredeemable pose on your own to get the full NC treatment. My father would say that my mother lied and manipulated us into taking her side during the divorce. The truth is that he boasted to me about pulling a gun on her to teach her a lesson, and then didn't understand why I thought that was unacceptable. I haven't spoken to him in a decade since that discussion. To this day, I believe he was contemplating murder, suicide, or family annihilation. If you ask my mill why both her sons moved in with their dad when they were around 12, she'd say their dad manipulated them against me. I did nothing wrong. But it turns out they just liked being with dad more because they didn't have to raise their baby sister for their mom, and he didn't abuse them. Abusers never believe it's them. I had PTSD and didn't deal with it. In short, I was a shitty dad. Not sure how many people understand PTSD. Even those of us that have it. You look normal. No one can really tell you are emotionally/mentally screwed up. It's very unpredictable, and unpredictable can be rough on kids. I yelled too much and have worked hard to stop. Hope you aren't in a blame cycle and have forgiveness for yourself. It's hard. I wish the side effects of PTSD were more publicly recognized. I have struggled with it for more than 10 years, and it wasn't until I met my last psychiatrist 3 years ago that I truly learned how extensive the impacts are to my life. He even recommended a book, The Body Keeps the Score, which goes into further detail of the impacts. It's horrible to deal with, and I feel like I have to constantly be on the lookout and question my emotions/reactions to ensure it isn't my PTSD exacerbating things. My son hasn't spoken to me in over 10 years. He had behavioral issues as a teen. I took him to doctor after doctor to get him help. He ended up in a partial hospitalization program. He had them fooled for weeks that there was nothing wrong with him. But one day it all came crashing down. After that, he deteriorated quickly in that program. We had come to the point where he was either going to full hospitalization, a boys' school for troubled teens, or he was going to be arrested for assault. His father, whom he only saw maybe twice a year, didn't want that and said he wanted to take custody of him. The program would only let that happen if my son was enrolled in a comparable program with his father. Father said of course. Didn't happen. My son grew up and was a terror to his father and had little to no contact with me. He got arrested a few times. After one particularly bad fight with his father, he got kicked out. After a few months, my son contacted me. On Mother's Day, he told me he was in the Marines and was done with basic training and was going to be given an assignment soon. I'll never forget how proud I felt of my son then. Shortly after, I get contacted by the Marines, asking if I knew where my son was. He went to war the day after Mother's Day. After a few years without contact, he contacted me again, said he was doing much better and wanted to visit me. I said yes. I should have known when I had to pay for his bus ticket that he wasn't better. He stayed with me for a few days and I thought all was well. Not so much. 2 days after he left, I got a call from my credit card company. He stole my card and put $1,600 of airsoft pistols on it. I was given the choice to pay it or call it fraud, in which case the credit card company would press charges. I called it fraud. I haven't seen him since. I'm still his friend on Facebook and have seen that he poses as a wounded Iraq vet. That is disgusting and shows me he hasn't changed at all. That's why I don't talk to him. I'm a parent of a child who does still talk to me, but rarely, and I fully accept that it is my fault. I was an immature parent and made some bad decisions in addition to being inconsistent with my parenting due to immaturity. I'm also on the spectrum, but that's something I didn't find out until a few years ago when my son was diagnosed. I know I wasn't great and I understand my daughter and I try to give her space. Thank you for acknowledging your fault and for respecting your child now. My mother told me 3 weeks after I lost my father/best friend at 14 that he has told her on his deathbed that adopting me was his greatest mistake. It stuck with me my whole life. I'm 38 now and know it wasn't true, but that narcissistic beak can rot in hell. When my dad died, my sister didn't want to share his inheritance the way I thought was fair. She has 2 kids. I had Nan at the time. She told me he loved her and the kids more than me anyways. I'll never forget. I have the screenshot. It made me speechless. I grew up in a retirement community. What I've noticed was it's due to a few things. The parent is intolerant of their child's life choices. That can be everything from drugs, religion, politics, racist ideology, parents, who their kids married, etc. Sometimes it's the parent's unpleasant personality from either some personality disorder or just plain being an asshole. Some kids usually stay away cause they feel they've disappointed their parents and are hiding their life from them. The majority of the issue is usually due to an unpleasant parent. Side note, how do you grow up in a retirement community? Aren't those usually age restricted to 55 plus? I think my uncle would say it's because his sons were brainwashed by their wives. The truth is, I think my cousins didn't see that my uncle's diagnosed narcissism wasn't normal because they were raised by him, their wives, as outsiders. Pointed this out to them for the first time, and they made their decision from there. This is what happened to me and my sisters. SMH. 24 years old, when it dawned on me, wait a second, mother never would have had to get us out the horrible abusive situation had she not got us in it in the first place. Literally never questioned it before then. I'm lucky. Both my adult children call me multiple times a week. But my ex, their father, complains that our daughter rarely calls him. I've told him many times that if he wanted her to call more often he needs to listen to her. He's a pretty narcissistic dude who only wants to talk, and if he takes a breath and you try to jump into the conversation, he either gets louder to drown you out, or he goes dead silent, clearly in his waiting until you shut up so I can talk mode. He never asks questions or expresses any interest in their lives. My son puts up with it because he can direct some of the conversation by bringing up sports or interesting historical stuff or books or whatever, and then they can have somewhat of a discourse, although listening to the inevitable droning lecture is always included. My daughter has little patience for that, so she rarely calls him. Even after I told him what he should try, he ignores me, which is what he did for nearly the entirety of our marriage. He still periodically bemoans the fact that she doesn't call. Long story short, some kids don't call because their parent isn't listening to them. I'm just here for the what not to do with my kids advice. Child here, and I just want to say, huge props to the parents taking accountability. I wonder if mine will ever do the same. I had a patient, she has since passed RIP, who didn't talk to her youngest daughter. We were very close, saw her 3x a week. So I asked her why she thought her daughter distanced herself away from her. She simply said that they were too alike and they butted heads, even over little things. She did admit that, since they distanced themselves from each other, she has had more peace, and she thinks her daughter does too. Not sure if her daughter went to her funeral, although in my head I'm hoping she did. She died from COVID. My mum says I'm too much like my dad, which is why we butt heads. My dad used to say I was too much like my mum, which is why we butted heads. Because they are so lovable and have no issues that cause us to bump heads. Being told I was just like my dad hurt me as a young teen because he was always nasty to me, and once I turned 18 I cut contact instantly. I know of a distant family cousin whose parents fired him from their very successful family business because he refused to take his wife and children to their church and worship the way they did. In retaliation, he and his wife refused to allow his parents to see the grandchildren. They sued. They lost. They never were able to see their grandchildren and eventually died. He ended up with the business anyway by default, not by the will. They lost decades of grandchildren just by being stubborn. Nobody in the family had anything to do with them the last 35 years of their lives, and they were miserable. F them. Parents. If you F over your children, don't expect to ever have your grandchildren. I wasn't there for them like I should have been. I had a stillborn and began having mental health issues with depression and eventually DX bipolar, and ended up leaving the girls with their dad. I don't blame them. As the bipolar daughter of a bipolar mother, thank you for letting them live with their dad. I sterilized myself so I could never inflict that level of suffering on another human being. We begged our dad to please let us live somewhere else, but he was too busy working to job to see her completely out of control behavior. Because I failed them as a father, I'm going to pretend my dad said this. Child of parents I didn't talk to and parent of a child who doesn't speak to me. It's a lot of mental health issues. Didn't break the cycle. That S is on me. I'm better now. Although my parents have both passed, there may be a reconciliation with my child, but I doubt it. This is exactly why I've chosen to not have children. My parents sucked, and I'm very low contact. Both of their parents weren't great at a lot of things, for different reasons, so I decided to break the cycle and not have kids. But I'm glad you see your faults and can admit them. Hopefully one day my parents can admit their faults also, even if just privately. I'ma read through these comments and see if my dad is a redditor. Edit. This kinda blew up. Can you look for mine too? When my parents died, we found a chalkboard in their attic where my mom had written, "Why do my children hate me?" She never knew. For the record, killing and cooking my pet didn't help her cause. That is the creepiest death story I read in so many sentences. I'm so sorry you lived with her for 18 plus years. I read this entire thread and was so confused as to why so many people left their parents and moved to North Carolina. Then I saw one comment that explained NC as no contact. I kept reading stuff like my dad slapped me, so I went NC, as if North Carolina was some safe haven. Lol, must have been a confusing read. I have 4 kids. My 2 oldest aren't living with me. My oldest daughter talks to me some. My oldest son wishes me dead. I made many mistakes when my kids came back to live with me. Ex-wife lost custody. My eldest hated my LTR girlfriend. My daughter was right. She was terrible and consequently so was I. My daughter left to go back with her mother as she was not doing well here. I understand. Now, why? My LTR made eldest son's life miserable too. During that time I broke up with the LTR. It was too late. My eldest son left to go be with his mother and sister. I'm sure that my ex-wife is not helping this matter, but he is mad at me and I know I made some pretty bad decisions. I have accepted the fact I may never have a relationship with him ever again. I know this wasn't the point of this post, but I'm the grown child. 5 years ago, on Thanksgiving no less, my mother told me my wife and I are bad parents because our daughter is an only child. Then followed it up by saying my wife graduated from a terrible high school. Not sure where that came from. She then topped it off with an ugly racist remark about my white sister-in-law being married to a black man. Lastly, she said I was not allowed to tell my wife any of this. That lasted about 45 seconds. And that was the end of that. I don't mind hearing this side of things as well. I'm the person that doesn't talk to their parents. Hearing other people's stories help. It's such a struggle because we are told family comes first, but what if family is corrosive to your life? When you and your partner make a family of your own, they come first. Getting the corrosiveness out of your life becomes necessary and easy.